Welcome to the Divine Feminine Revolution podcast, where women are magical and empowered. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Monday, psychologist turned transformational feminine business coach. This podcast is for you if you want to prioritize your own pleasure, face your fears, and manifest your desires. This podcast is sponsored by the Fearless Feminine Academy, where I teach women how to turn their trauma into their superpowers. My goal is to show women that we can heal our world by creating time and financial freedom by doing whatever the fuck we want. Are you ready for the Divine Feminine Revolution? Let's get vulnerable and go deep. I'm so honored that you're here. Hey everyone, welcome to the Divine Feminine Revolution podcast. I'm super excited for this episode. It's going to be a little bit different because I have the awesome Ashley Rachel here, and we are going to be talking all things podcasts. And she's got some amazing ideas and lots of things to share with people. And so we're going to just kind of put a little container around that and do a little live vision boarding, so to speak, around what wants to kind of be born in the realm of podcasts. So Ashley, give us a little bit of just a brag intro and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're all about.
Sure. Oh, I'm so excited for this, Megan. Thank you for having me on here. So my name is Ashley Rachel. I am a mindset coach. I'm a self-love mentor. I'm a breathwork facilitator for ambitious women, spiritual leaders, and just go-getters, women who are ready to put themselves first. And that's what I do. I help women put themselves first, prioritize their needs, overcome people-pleasing, find their voice, create boundaries, and really just stop abandoning themselves for other people. And I love what I do. A little bit about me is I'm super close to getting my master's degree in counseling. My last ever class is actually this weekend. So I'm so excited.
Congratulations. What a huge deal. And I am so impressed with the empire you've been creating while you've been doing that. Wow.
Yeah, it's been a lot. I actually started as a blogger about 2 years ago. I started actually as a travel blogger, which is kind of funny because it's so different from what I do now. But I started by writing travel articles while I was in undergrad and studying mental health and holistic wellness and spirituality. And as I was learning all of this stuff and kind of growing myself at the same time, and then also writing and being creative online, I started kind of slowly writing about self-care and self-love and the things that I was learning in my life and in school. And my travel blog turned into more of a mental health blog. And slowly I started to put myself out there more, and I started to grow an email list, and I started to get more vulnerable, which was really scary at the beginning. And I know, Megan, you talk a lot about being seen, and that was just a huge part of my journey. But I started to put myself out there, and women started emailing me saying wow, your tips and your stories and your lessons are really hitting home. And that's when I realized wow, I think this can actually be something for me. I love this. And so then I got into coaching, which is how we met in the coaching mentorship with Lauren. And I just love it. I'm so excited about where it's headed. And I'm so excited to start with the podcast and start reaching people. I love writing. That's, I love email and I love writing, but I'm really excited to reach more people with my voice.
Yes, that's awesome. And I think you're so way ahead of the game. I was just talking with a client last hour, and we were talking about would you redo grad school? And I was like, if I knew what I knew now, probably not. That was, it was a great way. It was the vehicle to get where I thought I wanted to go. But at that time, I wasn't really aware of the coaching industry and technology, and everything has changed so much that you can have your own personal platform, which is so freaking liberating. And that's why I think the podcast is such a gift because to me, like we were talking about in the green room, I kind of feel like the way I've done mine with interviews, it is kind of like therapy style. It's people come on, we have an awesome conversation, they tell a part of their story, they get vulnerable, they've got little nuggets, spread in there. And then, people can go binge the episodes. And so it's like you're putting this catalog of work out there. And I know every coach that I've binge watched their podcasts, I've ended up hiring them, like, so I
Uh-huh.
think it's a great strategy. And for me, I've tried a lot of different strategies. I love doing groups. I love working one on one with people, but there's something about just this like one session, just zoom into someone's life that has just been like so dynamic and so fun. So for me, the podcast has really just been like easy and joyful and just it's like a little different each time. Like none of them are the same. And so I just really thrive with that variety. And I think it's a great strategy.
Yeah. Oh, you're making me so excited. I can't wait to
Yeah.
start.
So you kind of started a little bit. So like catch us up, like what have you done so far? What are your ideas?
Mhm. So I have a name idea. I'm like 90% set on it, not 100%, but I'm pretty sure. I think I'm gonna go with the self-love embodiment podcast
Mhm.
and really talk about embodying the woman who truly loves herself, who truly honors herself, who puts herself first. Because I think embodiment is like a huge part of my coaching, and I think it's really important that we're really living and breathing and feeling like living as if the woman that we want to become. And so that's my idea. I have one episode recorded, and then I have an interview I did with a past client recorded, and I have a couple more interviews scheduled for the next couple months with clients. And so I'm starting to create the content for it. But I'm excited to start consistently recording episodes. And I'm also really excited to learn a little bit more from you about the best way to launch it, to hype it up. I just haven't figured out exactly how I want to go about that yet.
Yeah, so I love the embodiment piece, and I think, like, as therapists, that's kinda like what we're doing, and God knows, like, society, we're very, like, disembodied because of the trauma and the busyness, and it's such a powerful, feminine power technique, and so, like, I feel like that is the cutting edge. My first suggestion, if you haven't already done it, would be to just Google and see what kind of embodiment podcasts are out there. I did this, like, a little late in the game because I had run a bunch of rounds of Fearless Feminine Academy, and there are other Fearless Feminine coaches with trademarks, and so I was like, "Oh, shit. Okay, I guess we're gonna pivot here a little bit." So, do a little bit of market research and just see what's out there as far as, like, embodiment. I'm sure there's lots of stuff out on self-love, and then just figure out, like, what you want your title to be, and since you've already recorded some of the stuff, I might just, like, go ahead and grab it if you wanna be, like, super like, now that I kinda have everything, centered around Divine Feminine Revolution, like, I may go ahead and eventually, like, trademark that or something,
Mhm.
or at least grab the web addresses and, like, the handles and all that stuff. And, I think obviously, like, if it can all be kind of similar, like your name or, whatever your coaching is, like, it's just easier for people to find. So that would be my first suggestion. I totally had to freak out when I was like, there's the Fearless Feminine podcast, and then there's Feminine and Fearless, and then there's like 12 other Fearless
But I saw that
podcasts.
you it kind of like helped you, right? It gave you like a new direction and you embraced
Yeah.
a name that ended up being like really cool, right?
Yeah, and same thing happened. I'm about to launch one-on-one, and I, like, had this, like, name of what I was gonna call the program, and then I, like, Googled it again, and I'm like, "Oh, someone beat me to that one." But then I was like, "Okay, there's this one actually, like, fits a little bit more." So, definitely, like, do your research
Okay.
work and just see what's out there. Like for me with Divine Feminine or for you for like self-love or embodiment, say someone's already looking up a feminine power podcast or an embodiment podcast, like you're gonna, obviously be in those search results. So like I do think it's good to have some of those keywords in there. You just want to have like whatever your flavor is and then be like distinct enough that it's not the same. Although there are actually multiple podcasts with the same name, so that is a thing. They just may not be trademarked or whatever. But
Yeah.
you wanna I wanted to have like my own little unique stamp where it was like, I wanted to be original. Like that's one of my values.
Yeah.
So I would do some research around the name. And then if you feel like pretty decided, not that it can't change, like I would go ahead and claim that space. Like you could sign up for I use Libsyn, but you could use like whatever other there's Anchor, there's a couple different other ones.
Mhm.
And then the way that I started was I just invested in a microphone, which you may already have. And
Yeah.
then I used Zoom to record and I just started like scheduling people in.
Mhm.
You're good at the email, so like make a little like intro blurb of like how you're going to run it and what to expect. And then one of the biggest edges for me right now is just like repurposing content and using the same thing but spreading it out to different venues. So I just went and did Facebook Lives. And so that was like a good way to hype it in general because I started doing episodes maybe 3 or 4 months ago and it's only going live this week. So I just use it to promote like launches and to just like establish myself as an expert and then to show people like this is what it looks like to work with me, which I think is definitely like the biggest advantage, especially if you're doing experiential work like embodiment or breath work. When I went to the She Podcast conference, I was going to do more like therapy style, which definitely is in the heart of it. Like people are vulnerable, they're telling their story, that piece is there. But one of the keynote speakers ran the Women's Meditation Network, and she had switched from business coaching into just doing these meditations. And I thought, oh, like I could just do like a 10-minute thing, record it, and then be done. And then that's my podcast episode. So I
Yeah.
kind of pivoted and was like, oh, I'm just going to do a solo podcast, which I may eventually do more of like meditations or like experiential, just like little pieces of work. But like I said, I really enjoyed interviewing people because I'm a little bit of a coaching addict and I'm in so many different communities, I was meeting all of these incredible revolutionary women and leaders, and they had just the most amazing stories. And I'm kind of like living out my talk show fantasy
That's so
of
fun.
like being like Oprah or something and just interviewing people. And then, it's been great to see like those people share it with their communities. People want to tell their story, they want to be on your podcast. So it's kind of a nice little magnetic thing.
Yeah. I
So what does that bring up for you?
I wanted to ask about that. I think it sounds like podcasting is so great for reaching other people's audiences too. Do you find that that really happens, that your guests kind of like bring their people and they get to listen and get familiar with your stuff?
Yeah, totally. Because, they're like the guest celebrity. So it's like, oh, listen to my story. I just did this awesome interview. And then they'll share it.
Mhm.
So there's that factor. I feel like intuitively, like I'm just starting out because it's just being released. But my message from spirit is just that people will be looking for spirituality podcasts or they'll be looking for divine feminine and they'll find mine. Hopefully that's not just wishful thinking, but like that's just my message. One of the podcasts I listen to a lot is Wait, What the Fuck by Julia Wells. And her business has exploded into $1 million business in the past year after like years of not making money. And when I came on was right when she was starting her podcast. And I have binge watched her podcast, which is amazing.
Wow.
And gone on to watch other ones, which I think this could be a really nice niche for you, is um, her coach, Lacey Sites, does like a live coaching podcast where she takes like a coaching client through start to finish. Hers is called
Yeah.
Literally. And those are two of my favorite podcasts that I binge watch all the time. And so it's just a great like knowledge base. It's a great calling card. And then I think like if someone binge watches all of your episodes, they're gonna learn so much from you before they even get in. So then if they hire you as a coach, like basically you have this strong foundation of like you've already taught them a lot of knowledge and then you can get like super specific and deep into the work because they already feel connected to you. You've already taught them a lot. Like it's just like prime to go. So
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm most excited about, I think, because I know that I've listened to podcasts and it's like even just after a couple episodes, you're like, you feel so connected to somebody and you're like, wow, they really get me and I totally get them. And it's like this connection that you can get a connection totally through through writing emails and blog posts, but it's not quite the same when you can actually hear somebody's words and how they say things and the stories they tell. And so I'm really just excited for this new level of visibility and expressing myself too. I think like expressing myself using my voice that hasn't always come naturally. And I think especially when I got into the online space, writing has always I'm always just I love writing and it's always been so easy to express myself through writing, but it hasn't always felt as easy to express myself through speaking. And as I'm kind of growing in confidence and getting on live videos and coaching and I'm finding like, wow, I actually can use my voice really powerfully and it's not as scary. And so this just feels like the right next step and I'm so excited.
Yeah, and I think I was talking with Stephanie, if you catch the live from yesterday, and we were just talking about like these women are taking over the airwaves, and it's not like Fox News, it's not CNN, it's like we're our own like sovereign authorities, and we're like, listen, this is how it is. Like, let me teach you some stuff, you know. It's like kind of I don't know, and, like, if we wanna go, like, mystical with it, which, of course I do, like, I feel like it's just, like, dreaming up this reality, and there's so many powerful women thought leaders. I know you and I are, like, kinda specializing in that, like, powerful women department, and, like, supporting the powerful women because we're doing so much. We do need to do the inner work and, the breath work and the healing sessions and all those things, the self-love.
Yeah. It's so exciting just to think that with a podcast, you can reach so many people and empower so many women. And even just like you brought up, like empowerment for women, just to think about the history of like women haven't always gotten to express their voices. And like this just hasn't always been possible in history. So we just live in such a cool time, I think, where women are standing up and letting their voices be heard and sharing their thoughts. And it's so cool that we kind of get to be, I mean, not the first, but it's sort of early in history for all of this, I think.
Yeah, and you can watch some of the other episodes that we did, but, like, compared to roughly, these are rough numbers, like, on YouTube, there's something like 14 million people. With podcasts, it's less than, like, 1,000,000. So it's still, like, a relatively, like, kind of undiscovered, and podcast listeners are very loyal. They're not just gonna watch one episode usually, they'll watch the whole thing, and, it's just, like, a small, tight-knit, intimate, intellectual community, and so I think if you're like the deep thinkers, it's a great place for it. And I feel like I'm kind of the reverse with you with the writing. Like, I know my writing is powerful, and if I let it flow, like I can write very quickly. But then, all those years of grad school kind of ruined me a little bit. Like, I sort of kind of hate to write because I had to write like papers and papers and papers and papers. So, like, for me, especially because I've done, 10, 15 years of therapy, like, I'm just used to, like, being like, "Okay, go, we're talking." That's what I do for a living, and so it was much easier, like, lives have been pretty easy for me, but the cool thing about podcasts is, like, you've got this collection, like, the lives get lost, and maybe you repurpose that content for courses or whatever you're doing with them, but it's just, like, on social media, the time span is so short.
Yeah.
I even, like, will go and, like, look at my own profile and, like, look at all this stuff and be like, "Wow, like, okay, like, this is me, this is what I'm creating," because we're just constantly being bombarded with all these inputs, and so I feel like even taking that video away and just having it be the pureness of the voice, it's just very, like, deep and intimate and intellectual. So I love that you're embracing that in your life. And I think you have a lot to say and you do have a powerful voice and you have a powerful story.
Thanks. Yeah. And you know what else I was just thinking when you were saying that is a lot of the women in my audience, and I'm sure your audience too, are really busy women, right? We're doing a lot. And so that's another thing. I think when I had my VIP day with Lauren a few months ago, and one of the things that she said to me was, podcasting is like one of the only modalities where you're really respecting that other person's time because they can listen to it while they're doing anything and they don't have to have the commitment of like sitting down and watching the video and whatever else. So that's another part of it that I think is like just gonna like another reason why it's gonna reach more women who otherwise might not make the time for it, but they will when all they have to do is, throw their headphones on and go for a walk or do chores or whatever it is.
Yeah, and, like, Lauren Love's, podcast really inspired me because she was so real. Like, I remember listening to the episode she did with her business partners, they were kind of breaking up, and I was like, "Oh my god, she's, like, having this intense, vulnerable conversation live, like, in it, like, they're crying," Like, I'm like, "Oh, shit, wow." So I was really impressed with that, and then when I was working with her one-on-one, she actually filmed my first episode, the audio, and so we did like, it's a little bit different than how I do it now, but that she was actually, like, my first podcast interview, and I was like, "Oh my god, I got a big name, like, I feel so famous." Um, so it's kinda cool to see that, but, like, for me, it's just been so like, it's just very, like, intimate, and it to me, it's, like, the most therapy-esque version besides something like actually just being in a coaching container. And so
Right.
it's so neat to be able to show that depth and the power of storytelling. Like I can just not say enough of that. And I've been so impressed. I'm like a Brene Brown like devotee, like so many people are, but hers is still kind of academic. And so like there's something when you just like really get real and raw, and like I've been so honored with like what people have told me about who they are and what they've been through. And some of the interviews I've done blind. And so it's like I'm literally meeting this person really for the first time, and they just open up. And it's just like such a powerful to like show transformation from A to B. Like I was stuck here, I was in a negative place, I had this trauma happen to me. And then that opened me up to like really follow my dreams or go for it. And it's
Mhm.
just so inspiring. And I'm all about some inspiration.
It really is. I know that I've had so many moments listening to a podcast where I'm like, wow, like that one sentence they said or that one story they told, like changed everything. So many moments of that.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the structure. Like, do you
Yeah.
feel like you want it to be more like experiential client work? Do you want to like interview coaches? Do you want it to be solo? Like, I see people do a mixture of the three as well. Like, this one I feel like is a little more like strategy or like coaching more so than some of the other ones. But I would like that flavor too, because those episodes can be like super useful.
Yeah, I'm really drawn to solo episodes. It's like I love listening to those and I think I would enjoy doing those. So that's one of the things. Also, I love interview style. So I mentioned that I had interviewed one client and she was really amazing. I have a couple other clients I'm going to interview, and I definitely want to interview other powerful women and hear their stories. And then I haven't thought too much about the experiential, but I do like what you're describing with, a short meditation or a short breath work, or, something people can do really quick that might change their day. So I think I'm kind of thinking a combination of the three with probably mostly solo episodes.
Yeah, and I like the combos. I've seen that as well, where it's just like a little bit of each flavor. Like you can receive the work directly, like I'm the provider providing it for you. I can spotlight like the amazing work I've done with clients. I can also highlight like other industry thought leaders. So I feel like there is a magic mix. What worked really well for me is I just started doing episodes, and then they just kind of evolved. So and then I think just like going with where your pleasure and passion is, like what feels easy to you. Like for me, I just felt like actually the podcast happened. I was doing P School with Julia Wells, and there's like 200 women in this cohort, and they're all like amazing, incredible women. And so I just like put a post up and I'm like, hey, I want to interview you for my new podcast. And so it kind of organically started to I just started I was like, I'm gonna be like Miss Congeniality of this pod, and like, just get to know everyone, and like, kind of just meet and greet everyone because everyone was so cool. And so that's kind of how I just started booking, and I didn't even really know exactly what. And for me, still like running a brick and mortar psychology practice, I was kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm also kind of like doing free sessions. But then I was like, okay, I'm going to work on the mindset that every time I have a conversation with someone, it converts. Uh,
Yeah.
and I'm going to just like make a lot of friends, and, that was just like kind of my strategy. And that's how it naturally evolved. And so I really highly recommend getting ahead of it and like batching out a bunch of stuff. And like I said, like the first interview I did might actually be the 20th. But I would definitely like batch record some stuff. So like I would give yourself like 10, 20 hours just to like do interviews and see what you like best. So, do you know just from the work that you've already done what you tend to like enjoy the most? And this would be my question for you is like if you knew it was inevitably successful, what's the thing that almost feels like too easy to do?
I love that question. That is such a good one. Okay. I think it would just be like sharing stories and examples from my life and the lives of my clients. And, like sometimes after getting off a call with a client, I feel so fired up because, they had a major realization, or they had a big celebration, or they have like a really cool transformation story. And it's like, I want to share some of those types of things, in a way that's like confidential. But I get fired up about like sharing results and sharing stories. And so I think that feels fun and that feels easy. And if I feel, passionate and inspired about something I've been through or something somebody else has been through, that is just so easy and fun for me to talk about.
I love that. And the power of story, like it even, brain science says that it goes in so much deeper and we learn so much faster from stories that it's like one of the most powerful like sales techniques you can use. And obviously like our culture before there was written language, it was oral tradition. And so like the power of the story to connect is so amazing. And I know for me, like my one-on-one coaches probably can attest to this, but sometimes when I get one-on-one work, obviously it's like deeper, more intimate kind of container. But because I'll blame it on my like defined ajna in human design, like because I am so conceptual, I really do like podcasts or group programs or like online classes because I feel like I actually learned so much more because there is that like kind of class academic piece to it versus talking one on one. And so with podcasts, you're like building this like legacy of like all the work that you've done and you're telling your story and you're telling other people's story. And like I feel like the podcasts I binge watched, sometimes I've gotten better coaching strategy and advice from that because it's like a linear story or like in a group program where there's like modules and different things like that. Now obviously like all the different works are important, but I think it's just kind of there's so much, if I do like a year of podcast and there's 52 episodes and there's an hour each, then that person has listened to 52 hours of me teaching them something. So like you're
Mhm.
not even going to get that like in a group program, right? And then you do it once and it's done. Like I feel like as a therapist, I've had so many deep conversations. I've talked to people, there's so much knowledge and then hopefully that person carries it with them. But like
Mhm.
we could all learn from these deep conversations. And so I feel like that's the magic of podcasts. To me it's almost like televised, well not televised, but recorded, audio recorded therapy.
Yeah, I love it, and I love how passionate you are about it too. I can tell, like, how much you love it, and it really is. I think it's really gonna be amazing to just, like, reach different people and share those stories and like you say, like, have that built up, content that people will go back and it's not just gonna disappear. I had a question, though, for you about I would really love to know about like launching and what you've done to kind of hype it up because I've seen you kind of share some things like it's coming and the podcast is happening and so I'd love to know a little bit more about how you've done that.
Well, I love to hear that feedback because I feel like I'm like such a last minute sort of impulsive person. That my coaches are always like fussing at me because I'm like, oh shit, I've got a challenge and like what time am I gonna do it? So I feel like one of my growth edges is like the pre-hype, like the behind the scenes, like, hey, this is coming. Some of that happened naturally just because I like videoed the episodes and live stream them. So like they kind of did double duty as a live and as a podcast. So like that kind of created its own natural hype. Um, but then I just really had watched Julia Wells and there's a couple other people who have used this like launch squad method, which is basically just like an email opt-in, and then you give away prizes for reviews. Other coaches I've seen have given away like a free session for leaving an Apple review. So it's just basically like incentivizing people to opt into your email list, which you know all about,
Mhm.
or because for me, this is a secondary business, but I'm still like really in that conversion phase. And so for me, I'm like looking at it like, okay, these are discovery sessions, sort of, just in the sense that I'm getting like an intimate connection with lots of different people. They're getting my flavor. Um, so I've kind of just used it as a strategy. Like it's my miscongeniality strategy, basically, to just like get really well known and meet a lot of people. And that's just like who I am. That's like a passion, obviously. So that's kind of been a piece of it. I think the email opt-in, obviously, like we all want to grow our list. I was telling you about my email phobia, and I will say, Ashley, you write like amazing emails. So if you're not on her email list, like get on it because I do think that is your gift. Like you have a lot of simple, elegant, powerful like techniques and journal prompts and meditations. And so like sharing that can be such a vehicle of knowledge. And for me, where I think I'm a little bit different from a lot of coaches is like, yeah, I want to have this successful business and make all the money, but like I also feel this like huge soul purpose mission to take all of this like therapy knowledge that I've gained from working with people for the past like 15 20 years. I'm almost 40. One of my clients yesterday said that they thought I was 21 and I was like, yes, they were like 13, so whatever. But but anyway, I've just like when you're a therapist or like a teacher or like, a coach, a healer, like you're just witness to so many like beautiful transformations and lessons and wisdom and insights. Like I just feel like I want to make that accessible to everybody. And so that's where I love coaching. Like, even though it's higher ticket stuff, it lets me show up and just give a lot of this knowledge away for free. And I feel like a lot of the spiritual teachers and healers, like, that's our biggest mission. And then obviously, like, the more we connect with that and serve, like, that's also when the abundance comes in because it just can't not.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited. This is just so good. I don't know. I just have like so many thoughts going through my head. I'm just so excited. I don't
And I think
know.
the episodes kind of speak for themselves, so like I feel like I've not seen a lot of people live stream out their podcasts, but like as soon as I learned that Zoom, all you could do is share to Facebook, I like always Zoom my lives even just because I have a MacBook, and it's easier for me with my thing. So I
Mhm.
really like picked up because of that accessibility as a core value. As soon as I started doing coaching stuff, I'm like, I'm recording every single thing I say. We're going to repurpose this content. So that's been like one of my main strategies. And there's lots of stuff you can even do. Like, since you were a blogger, a lot of the things I learned at the She podcast is you can like transcribe your podcast interviews and then put all that type like on your website. And then that really helps your Google rankings because,
Yeah.
like, compared to a blog, which is maybe shorter, you've got this really long interview. And there's like, technology that can transcribe it for you. A piece that really worked well for me was just hiring it out. And that's been a big edge because even in my brick and mortar business, I've like kind of done it all myself, which is not the best strategy. And I don't necessarily recommend it, but maybe a trauma response, to be honest. But hiring someone and just being able to like stay in my zone of genius, which is just showing up and doing the thing, and then letting someone else do the technical thing has been awesome. Like I totally gave myself like a headache and a mini nervous breakdown trying to do my own funnels and like try to learn all these different technologies and be everywhere. And so for me, like the more I simplify my strategies and approaches and just like stick to one thing and stick to like what I'm good at and hire out the rest, that is definitely taking my business next level for sure.
Yeah, I need to focus on that too because I'm like you too. I'm like, I want to do everything, like Miss Independent. I want to do it all. Like, I don't need anybody's help. But really, I would say really over the last few months, I'm realizing like there's so much power in support and even just a connection like this, you supporting me supporting you, and then like, just supporting other people and making those connections and those friendships. It's just really powerful, and it's been such a good lesson to me. Like, I don't have to do it all alone, and I think the podcast will be a cool way to just, let myself be supported, support more people, and make those connections so that I, can really feel into like I'm worthy of having these connections and I don't need to do it all by myself.
Yeah, and I think that's really divine feminine energy to be like, I'm gonna build a community. And I mentioned this in the episode yesterday, but I worked at a holistic treatment center with a dear friend who started it, and it has just turned into an incredible business. I'm gonna interview her soon. But she's got multiple locations. She's got like a huge staff. Her business is like $1 million business. But she had to expand and she thought she was just gonna be like one person doing it all. But like the spirit or the world, the divine had a bigger vision for her. And so she had to go like, oh, I'm a CEO and like I have a staff and I have a team and I'm like running the show rather than being a therapist. And so I think that that's one of the bigger lessons that I've learned more recently. And I'm just in the beginning phases of this, but being like, okay, like I've got someone on the payroll who's my podcast producer and
For me, just having someone come clean my house. Like, I've got like a single mom who is also an amazing healer, so total bonus. I'm gonna help her with her healing business, but she comes and helps me clean my house. I can spend 10 hours like cleaning, or if I spent that 10 hours on my business, like I could hire 10 people, you know? So it's just like having that bigger vision of like collaboration and cooperation. And I think so many of us have sisterhood wounds around like competition and like just, cattiness or whatever. And so I think working together is how we have that like inclusion and equity and diversity and expression. And so I think doesn't always happen in the coaching community because I think there's like a little bit of narcissism in the selling sometimes. But I think that there's a real it's kind of like sororities, like sometimes this can be like really negative influences for women. However, like if women can come together and for leadership and for like advancement and for progress, it can be like the most beautiful, powerful thing in the world. So, I think there's really a chance to build something huge.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, like 2021, I've been reflecting a lot, like on 2020
Yeah.
and what I want for 2021 and what's important to me. And I definitely see sisterhood, networking, friendships. Like I'm already building more circles. Like I just hired a therapist and just started seeing her. And like I'm finding ways to be supported and have those connections. And 2021 is going to be the year of teamwork, sisterhood, connection. And I just think it's going to be so great.
And legit, like they say that that is like the divine feminine is taking over. Like we are, it has been rising, but like 2021, like legit, we're in a whole new like world that we've never been in before. So I think you're like right tapped into the energies of that. And I know for me, like being a psychologist, it was like actually very lonely. Like, I mean, you had a lot of intense time with clients, but like, you're just like session, 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 session. Becoming a mom was kind of lonely, even though you're around people like constantly. It's just like it's like you're giving, giving, giving in all of these different scenarios. And so for me, like one of the biggest gifts of really investing heavily in myself with coaching and becoming a part of so many communities is just like it really opened up my social network in the most powerful, like divine, incredible way. And in ways that like I feel like so much growth has happened so fast. Like I don't even know like kind of what the fuck happened. Like I'm like, who am I? Like I like who I'm becoming, but like I think I can't even like really fully see that. And so it's nice when like other like, like I've witnessed your journey, you witnessed mine and will continue to. It's almost like the other person can see you a little more clearly than you can see yourself because like you're going through all this shit.
Yeah, and it's so funny because, like, sometimes I've had this experience so many times in my business, in my life, where it's like, in the moment, like, you never know what's gonna happen, what's happening. You're like, "I feel like everything's a mess," right? And then you get through it, and you look back, and you're like, "Wow, I can see how that was connected, and that was connected, and that was connected," and it all adds up, but you don't always know what's gonna happen in the moment, but I've been really trying to hold on to that faith of, like, it's all working out for my highest good, and everything that's happening, it's leading me to where I'm meant to go. And I think holding on to that perspective is so important because in the moment it doesn't always make sense at all.
Yeah, I know. And for me, it's been like, my brand was fearless. And that was almost a mindset like head trip in itself because it actually like brought up a lot of fears. And then like getting really visible online, like, because
Mhm.
even though I am super extroverted and people oriented, I'm a hermit role model in human design. So like I do have a part of me that gets like really shy and anxious and like actually does need to go like totally unplug. And so it's interesting because to really be able to like show up as you are who you are, like it's so empowering and brave and powerful and it's so scary. So like so much growth has happened and when you're growing like it doesn't always feel like especially for me having already had a successful business and then starting another one, I'm like, oh, I forgot this shit takes time.
Yeah,
I want it now.
I love it though. Like
Ah.
there's so much learning, there's so much growth, and I feel like we are growing like so much faster than we realize. But yeah, I'm so excited, Megan. Like I don't know, this is like hype. I knew I was excited to start a podcast, but talking to you, I'm like, oh my gosh, wait, I need to start it like right now.
Yes, and I think it is like a little bit of like an elite sisterhood here where like not everybody's going to pick that method. And I think it's just there's something kind of special about it. And it's not for everyone because I mean, like especially if you're paying someone, it's not the most expensive thing, but you're basically going to pay someone for the production time to do the editing, which is well worth the money. So it's just like embracing like who you are at the fullest levels, and I feel like the podcast really can show that. And there was something magical that happened when I went from these video interviews where you have all of the I can see what's behind you, like I can see what you're wearing, what you look like. When all of that went away and it just went to voice, was so it like got even more powerful because it's like just the raw power of the voice. Now, as a strategy, I'm actually gonna upload these videos and have a Divine Feminine Revolution podcast YouTube channel.
That's a good idea.
So I really want my things that I create to show up everywhere. It's just going to take me some time to actually get them uploaded, but I'm just recording, I'm saving, I'm collecting,
Mhm.
and then I'll repurpose some of this stuff. Actually, even some of these podcast episodes, like I'm going to turn this into a mini podcast course. And then I'm also going to include some of these things in the Fearless Feminine Academy as like bonuses because people have so much wisdom on the podcast, how to start this or how to do this, or if I have a branding coach talking about branding, or if I have a pleasure coach talking about pleasure, like they're like little modules in themselves, so to speak.
Yeah, so much wisdom.
Yeah.
I have a question. Would
Yep.
it be okay if maybe I think what would be really helpful to me if maybe would you help me come up with just a few like little action steps and things to take action on next for my podcast to get started, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, what I would say, and this is just my method, is just to like go for it and start like making time in your schedule to like do some and experiment
Yeah.
with it and see what you like. When I
Mhm.
got a certain level of episodes, I knew I wanted to hire someone. So I said, like, who does podcasts? Let me find someone to hire. And then
Mhm.
I had her scheduled. And then I kind of did another couple months where I was still just doing it before we decided on launch date. She actually has a handout of all of the steps, which I'm going to share with my Facebook group. So I can definitely give you like the checklist. I've got a couple resources on that. So just I'll message those over to you, and you can also find them in the Divine Feminine Revolution Facebook group. So it's always helpful to have like a little checklist. But like I was telling you, like honestly, I got this psychic reading 5 years ago that I was going to have this amazing podcast. Still took 5 years because I was doing other things. Took about 6 months to go from like the very first episode to having it live. So like it just takes as long as it's going to take. And I think that's a big trap because we look around at these like successful $1 million coaches and they have all of these things and we think like, oh, to get there, and it's like we can just like overcomplicate it because what we need first is like sales and clients and
Mhm.
programs. And then we can have like websites and podcasts and YouTube channels, So like we want to do client attraction, but like, you also got to eat. So like actually you want sales. And
Yeah.
then you can build out like all the bells and whistles and be everywhere and repurpose all the content. But like just getting to the point where it's like, what's gonna make me money, which like I said, I mean, I feel like podcast is kind of a long-term strategy, but you only need a couple people to binge watch your stuff to then want to buy. So I think it's effective as well.
Yeah, and I think too with my email list, because I have a lot of people on my list, I think being able to share right away with them, I think that that will probably speed up the process of like getting my podcast seen a little bit, which is exciting.
Yeah. And then I think, like I said, just like building the hype piece of it and like behind the scenes, like this is what it looks like. This is,
Mhm.
like, oh, my Apple podcast was approved, like taking a screenshot of that, like putting it on there and like just sharing the journey with them as it's happening. Like I said, I'm like a last minute Sally. So like I tagged the person who's in my first episode and I was like, guess what? You're the first episode and here's the audiogram. And she was like, oh, that's amazing. Let me share it with my community. We did the interview probably like 2 or 3 months ago. So,
Mhm.
it's kind of like I've seen people do like anniversary relaunches of the podcast where they like rehype it after a year or after so many episodes, whatever. So it's just like continually keeping the buzz going on it. Um, But yeah, like I think it's just like try and see if it really lights you up, because it is a time and money. It doesn't have to be, but like it probably is a more time and money intensive strategy.
Yeah.
Like I love like this YouTube mommy blogger, and she's a full-time mom who works, and she's like, I spend like 4 to 5 hours on my videos, and I'm like, wow, that's like I need
Yeah, that's a
for me,
lot.
I need like 4 to 5 hours of like seeing clients, like that's where I'm at in my business. So like that's where you like kind of hire it out or whatever. But just see like, I that's been the biggest revolution for me personally, is just the pleasure-based business, because I've done it the hard way. Like this is what I'm supposed to do, like all the shoulds, everything they tell you. And then when I started going like, but if that doesn't feel good to me, then like it's not working for me. So just like honoring really, like I can tell you're inspired, juiced you up with the podcast, vibe. But yeah, just like kind of, going with what's the easiest path, what's the most pleasurable path.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like I've been on that journey too of,
Yeah.
if this doesn't feel good anymore, then I'm gonna find a new way to make it feel good or find a new way to do things. And I think that's been really my journey with so many things over the last, I mean, really ever since I started. I told you I started with the blog, and I also started with Pinterest, and that's how I got people. And then after a while I was like, you know what, this doesn't really light me up the same way, and like I want to try getting more on Facebook and more on Instagram. And now it's like, now I want to use my voice more and now do the podcast. So I think you're so right. Like it's all about just following what lights you up.
Yeah. And I think it's a little bit more of an introvert method, because it's like more intimate, it's deeper. For me, I'm a little more active in this one because we're talking about the podcast strategy, but like a lot of times I actually don't say a whole lot. It's more like someone else telling their story.
Yeah.
So I think if you are an introvert or an intellectual, like it is a good strategy. And it might be a comfortable way, because it's like, introverts love one-on-one,
Yeah.
and to go deep. And so like you have that, but then you can share it. And so it becomes very social. And
Mm,
for me, obviously, you can tell I'm chatty and I can just like talk it up. But a lot of people struggle with lives because they don't know what to say. And so I think with a podcast, you can have a structure if you want it, and you can lean more on your guest is doing a lot more of the talking.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good balance. Like when I'm feeling extroverted, then I'll do my solo episodes. And when I'm not, I'll do the interviews. So yeah, that's a great balance.
Yeah, I love that. And then it's also showing like all the different facets of who you are, and we just love like complex beings. And one of the coolest parts is that I've gotten to tell my story through other people's story. Like I may not have been like, oh, I really want to talk about this. But then when someone tells this powerful story, it's going to naturally like bring up something in me that then feel like I have permission to share because it's in context. So it's gotten me to talk about all kinds of things that I maybe wouldn't have led with on a live, but they've just like naturally evolved, and they've like kind of synchronized to like come forward within the episode.
Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
So Ashley, I mean, I feel like we can maybe do like a second interview where you tell like more of your story and we really get to know you as well, because I know you've got a powerful story as well. But go ahead and tell us like, how do we work with you? Where do we find you? How do we get on your email list?
Yeah, so email list is where it's at for sure. You can go to my website. It's ashleyrachelcoaching.com. I have a free mindset library with some worksheets and journal prompts, and I have a really cool workshop all about self-care that you can grab for free. And then I'm also on Instagram quite a lot lately, and that's also at Ashley Rachel Coaching.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for taking the time to come on today. And I'll definitely be binge watching your podcast for sure. So I'm excited for you to start as well. And I hope people got what they needed out of this episode. We'll catch you later. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Divine Feminine Revolution podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a 5-star review. Want to keep the conversation flowing? Find us on Facebook at the Divine Feminine Revolution Facebook group, where revolutionary women gather to listen to their hearts, monetize their gifts, and change the world.